So we are on day 7,432 of the epic G-Man and Robbie poker cheating drama, and in a recent development, G-Man broke his silence by penning a lengthy post on 2plus2, detailing information which purports to prove Robbie's guilt. And while many were heavily persuaded by G-Man's post, personally I found it extremely underwhelming, and in this video I'll explain exactly why. The first piece of evidence presented by Garrett is a hand where Robbie and Rip both have ace-queen. Rip opens under the gun, Robbie 3-bets in the cutoff, and Rip calls. The flop is ace-ace-8, and it goes check-check. The turn is the king of spades, and Rip makes a very small 4K bet, and Robbie simply calls. The river is the 6 of clubs, Rip bets very small, and Robbie just calls again with the queen of clubs. In addition to this hand being played extremely passively by both players, Garrett notes that it appears that Rip is signaling to Robbie during the hand, possibly in an attempt to get her to fold. And now that it has come out that Rip was backing Robbie in this game, it's safe to assume that there was some level of slow playing and collusion going on between these two. Now, to be clear, any form of slow playing or collusion is absolutely wrong and should not be allowed in any high stakes game because it reduces the EV of other players. In fact, if Hustler wanted to do things properly, any player that even has a piece of another player in the game would be required to make this publicly known beforehand. However, the unfortunate reality is that collusion and soft playing happens all the time in poker and is not in and of itself evidence of further cheating, especially at the scale Robbie's accused of. So let's move on to the next example. In this hand, Robbie's up against Ruski, and G-Man notes that Rip appears to be staring down during the hand. Garrett speculates that when he's looking down like this, he's being signaled, possibly by the lights on his microphone jack. There are several issues with this claim. First, since his eyes are obscured, you can't really see where he's looking. Perhaps he's looking at his chips, or he's just wondering if he forgot to turn off his stove. Or maybe he's considering whether he should switch his car insurance to Geico. These explanations are just as, if not more, plausible. Secondly, if he's signaling to Robbie whether or not she's ahead, why would she bet while behind and not wait for the signal instead? It appears that Rip looks down in a similar way a number of times in the same hand, but she ends up losing, which runs counter to the idea that their system makes her somehow clairvoyant. So in this sequence, Garrett notes various odd behaviors of both Robbie and Rip, implying that something nefarious is going on between the two. According to Garrett, Robbie sees something off camera and gives a concerned look, then glances at Rip. Rip then mouths, "Get it," while motioning to the casino floor. Rip then appears to say to Robbie, "You are unbelievable." Robbie says something back, but her face is mostly off camera. Rip again mouths, "Get it once you go out there," and gets up and leaves the table. Robbie then also leaves the table, returning around 20 minutes later. So granted, their behavior here is a bit weird, and they're obviously trying to be covert with whatever it is that they're doing. But this literally could be anything. It could be that their yayo dealer has arrived with the hookup, or maybe it's a pizza delivery. Who the fuck knows? This really isn't evidence of anything other than odd, peculiar behavior, which is actually pretty standard in an LA card room. In the next scene, Robbie and Eric are in a big pot where Eric rivers a flush, and Robbie has a set of jacks. According to Garrett, this is where Rip makes a suspicious face, looks at Robbie, starts shuffling chips to potentially distract, and then moves his left hand in Eric's direction, only to reverse when he thinks Eric notices him. Now that's one theory. Another theory is that Rip had been shuffling his chips all night long when not in hands, and he was reaching to tap Eric on the shoulder because Eric appeared to have fallen asleep when it was his turn to act. Also, if they had some type of CTO system where Rip's crotch is telling him whether or not Robbie should fold, why didn't he look down at his crotch once after the spade came off on the river? In the final piece of video evidence, we see Robbie mouth Jack 8 to Rip, which she was holding in the immediately preceding hand. According to Garrett, this was possibly to ensure that their signaling system was working correctly. Or, perhaps as her backer, Rip wanted to know what hand she tank folded with, and she told him. If it was something deeper and more sinister than that, it would probably be something that was best handled off table, not blatantly in front of everyone, including tens of thousands of viewers at home. On the whole, this video evidence is very circumstantial and speculative. There was zero direct evidence given of how the alleged cheating occurred. Odd behaviors and even collusion do not prove that there was some elaborate multi-person scheme which allowed Robbie to see other players' hole cards. Garrett then moves on to list various items which purport to show that the people alleged to have been involved in this operation both were strapped for cash, presumably showing motive, and have shady, possibly criminal pasts, with the implication being that this means that they will have the propensity to engage in devious acts again. However, in California and in many other jurisdictions, this type of character evidence would generally not be admissible in a trial because it can prejudice a jury against the accused, and past wrong deeds do not prove present crimes. Think about it. If we removed all of the shady and criminal people from poker, there would be like 3 people left. And finally, Garrett breaks down various contradictions and inconsistencies, both during the infamous Jack 4 hand, as well as in the aftermath. I won't go into the details on this because most of it has already been covered extensively by others. But although these types of contradictions are admissible to prove that Robbie isn't very credible, she's an LA native, so it was already safe to assume that she's faker than Rip's watch. Again, none of this is any direct proof of guilt. It seems that Garrett simply listed every possible bad and odd behavior that Robbie has ever been accused of, threw it in a blender, and then concluded that she was guilty. Now, just to be clear, this is not to say that there isn't significant evidence of guilt. There is. But without a shred of evidence showing the actual method by which Robbie was able to know Garrett's hand, there simply is no case. Is it Rip receiving signals in his crotch and then signaling to Robbie what to do? Or is it Robbie's magic red lantern ring, or her belt buckle, which apparently causes tremors that register on the Richter scale? Simply put, if the vibrating anal beads don't fit, you must acquit. And this is why I think Garrett made a major misstep by taking back his money after the hand. There was not sufficient evidence then or now to definitively prove that Robbie cheated. But by taking the money, Garrett pigeonholed himself to a place that will be very difficult to retreat from without major damage to his reputation and/or ego. So any appearance of an impartial investigation has given way to a fishing expedition/PR campaign where every fact is filtered through the lens of guilt to fit a particular narrative.
This is not really happening.